The first thing I remember after the accident is the color white.
White walls, white sheets, a white antiseptic smell that clung to the inside of my nose.
The second thing I remember is her face, Helen, my wife. Her expression was a perfect portrait of worried relief. Her eyes red-rimmed, her hand cool and gentle on my arm. She told me my name was Mark. She told me we had been married for 8 years. She told me I'd been in a terrible car accident, a head-on collision on a rain-slicked road, and she told me that the last 5 years of my life were gone, erased from my mind like a corrupted file on a hard drive. For 6 months, she was my world, my memory. She was the architect of my past, rebuilding it for me one story at a time. "This is your favorite coffee mug, Mark," she'd say, handing me a heavy ceramic cup with a faded picture of a lighthouse on it.
You always loved this old sweater. It's so you.
We had our first date at that little Italian place downtown. Remember? I never remembered. Of course, I'd just nod, trying to feel the connection, trying to see the man she was describing in the mirror. He seemed like a decent guy, a little boring maybe, a man who liked lighthouses and comfortable sweaters, a man who was deeply devotedly in love with his wife. Helen was endlessly patient. She'd answer the same questions over and over, her voice never losing its soft, reassuring tone. She managed everything: the bills, the insurance, my endless doctor's appointments. She was my devoted caretaker, my guardian angel. My friends and family, she explained, were giving me space. It was too overwhelming to have too many people around, too many conflicting stories. It made sense. My head ached constantly with the effort of trying to stitch together a life from her narrative threads. But sometimes, the threads didn't quite meet. There were gaps, little inconsistencies. She'd tell me a story about a vacation we took to Mexico, but later mentioned that my passport had expired 3 years before the trip was supposed to have happened. When I'd press, gently, she'd get flustered. "Oh, silly me. I'm getting our trips confused. My mind is just as jumbled as yours these days, honey." She'd laugh it off, a quick, nervous sound. She got particularly tense when I'd mention old friends. I had a flicker of a memory, a face named David, and the sound of loud, shared laughter. When I asked about him, Helen's face tightened. "David moved away, Mark, a few years ago. You two had a falling out. It's better not to dwell on it. It was always like that." The past she presented to me was sanitized, curated. It was a museum of a life, with all the interesting, complicated exhibits locked away in the basement. I felt a constant, low-grade sense of unease, like trying to walk in shoes that were just a half size too small. Something was wrong. My memory was gone, but my instincts weren't, and my instincts told me I was being managed, handled, like a fragile piece of glass. But I had no proof, nothing but a fog of confusion, and a wife who on the surface was the very picture of devotion. Who was I to doubt her? She was all I had. Yesterday that all changed. I was in the attic, a space I'd been told was mostly empty. Helen said we'd had a small roof leak a year or so before the accident, and had to throw out a lot of the old boxes. I was looking for photo albums, desperate for a tangible link to my own face. In a moment I couldn't recall. The attic was dusty and hot, smelling of old wood and insulation. In a far corner, tucked under a loose floorboard, and covered by a grimy old tarp, I found a heavy waterproof storage container. It was bone dry, no sign of any leak. My heart started to pound, a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I pried the lid open. It wasn't full of photo albums. It was full of me, my things that didn't fit the narrative of the boring man who liked lighthouses. There was a worn leather jacket, a collection of old concert ticket stubs, a framed photo of me, and the man I knew was David, arms slung over each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera on a mountaintop. And at the bottom, there was a journal, a simple black leather-bound book. My hands were shaking as I opened it. The handwriting was mine. I knew it instantly. It was forceful, slanted, the writing of a man in a hurry. I flipped through the pages, seeing entries about work stress, about fights with Helen over her spending, about her brother, Greg, and his constant need for money. The loving, simple life Helen had painted for me began to crumble into dust. I turned to the last entry. The date was written at the top. It was the day of my accident. The words stared up at me, a message from a ghost. My ghost. Helen is draining the accounts. She and her brother are planning to leave. I have a meeting with the lawyer today. I have to stop her. I read it again, and a third time. The air in the attic grew thick and heavy, and for a moment, I thought I was going to be sick. The car crash, the amnesia. It wasn't just a random tragedy. For her, it was a miracle. A get-out-of-jail-free card. It buried the man who knew her secret, the man who was on his way to stop her. It left her with a blank slate, a broken puppet she could control until the last of the money was gone. She thought the amnesia had buried her secret forever. She had no idea. The amnesia, the very thing she was using as her shield, was about to become my sword. It was the one thing that would let me unravel her lies, piece by piece, without her ever seeing me coming. I closed the journal, my mind a storm of ice and fire. The dutiful patient was gone. Downstairs, my loving, devoted wife was humming in the kitchen, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that I was living with my own executioner. I placed the journal back in the box, slid it under the floorboard, and replaced the tarp. Every movement was deliberate, silent. My mind, which for 6 months had been a swamp of confusion, was suddenly, terrifyingly clear. I walked down the attic stairs, my feet making no sound. Helen was at the counter, chopping vegetables for that bland chicken and rice casserole she made at least twice a week. She called it my comfort food. I now understood it was just easy, something to feed the invalid. She turned and smiled when she saw me, a bright, practiced smile that no longer reached her eyes. It never did, I realized. There you are, honey. I was starting to worry. Did you find anything interesting up there? The lie came so easily it scared me. No, nothing, just dust and old junk. You were right, it's pretty much all cleared out. I forced a small tired smile of my own. I think I'll just rest on the couch for a bit. My head is starting to pound. Her expression shifted instantly to one of concern, the mask of the caretaker snapping back into place. Oh, of course, you've overdone it. Come on, lie down. I'll bring you some water and your pills. As I lay on the couch, feigning a headache, I watched her. Every gentle touch, every soft-spoken word was now tainted, twisted into an act of manipulation. The water she brought me, the pills she counted into my palm, were they just that? Or was she keeping me slightly sedated, slightly foggy, to make her job easier? The paranoia was a living thing inside me, coiling in my gut. I had to fight to keep my breathing even, to keep my expression placid and vacant. I was an actor now, and this was the most important role of my life. My survival depended on it. That night, sleep was impossible. I lay in our bed, feeling the heat of her body next to me, and all I could think about was the coldness of her betrayal. I replayed the last 6 months in my head, but this time, I had the key, the cipher to translate her actions. Every memory was now suspect, every kindness a potential lie. I remembered a few months ago, I'd been feeling a bit stronger, more lucid. I'd suggested I could start looking at our finances, just to feel useful, to re-engage with my own life. Helen had shut it down immediately, but gently. Oh, Mark, no, don't you worry your pretty little head about that. It's all so complicated. All the insurance paperwork and the medical claims, it would just stress you out. And the doctor said you need to avoid stress. I've got it all under control, I promise. At the time, I'd felt a wave of gratitude for her protection. Now, I saw it for what it was, a firewall. She was keeping me away from the truth of our financial ruin, or rather my financial ruin, and her enrichment. And then there was David, my best friend, the man in the photograph, his grin so wide and genuine it made my heart ache. He had a falling out with you. What did that even mean? The man in that photo didn't look like someone I'd have a falling out with. I remembered asking more about it, and Helen had waved her hand dismissively. It was about money, Mark. He was always asking for loans. It put a real strain on you. It was the perfect lie to feed an amnesiac. How could I argue? I couldn't remember David's character, only his face. But the man in my journal, the man who was about to go to a lawyer, didn't sound like a man who was cutting off a friend over money. He sounded like a man who was fighting for his life. I needed to get to a computer. I needed to find David. Helen had helped me set up my new laptop. She'd installed memory-boosting games and set the homepage to a news site. She thought I just poked at it for an hour a day. She had no idea how quickly the muscle memory of typing had returned, how familiar the digital world felt. My mind was a blank. but my fingers remembered. The next morning, I put my plan into motion. While Helen was in the shower, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop. I feigned frustration, letting out a loud sigh. When she came out, wrapped in a towel, she asked what was wrong. I had a flash, I said, rubbing my temples. An old email, I think. Something about a pelican. Pelican, something. I let my voice trail off, looking confused. She frowned. A pelican. I don't know anything about that, honey. Pelican, _flyer_78. I said, as if the words had just popped into my head. That was it. It was an email address, I think. My old one. Before we used the Mark and Helen one. I looked at her, my eyes wide with manufactured hope. Maybe there are old pictures on it. From before. Her face was a canvas of conflicting emotions, suspicion, curiosity, and a flicker of something I couldn't name. Was it fear? But how could she deny me this? It was a memory, the very thing she was supposed to be helping me recover. To deny it would be suspicious. Well, we can try, I guess, she said, her voice a little tight. Do you remember the password? I pretended to think for a long, agonizing minute. Then I slowly typed, Isabel 1984. Nothing. I tried again. Isabel _1984. Nothing. I slumped in my chair, the picture of defeat. No, I can't remember. It's gone. Oh well, it was a long shot, she said, patting my shoulder, her relief palpable. She went to get dressed, leaving me with the laptop. But old Mark, the man who wrote that journal, had been smart. He'd been paranoid. And as I sat there, another flash, a real one this time, sparked in the darkness of my mind. Not a memory of an event, but of a pattern, a security question. What was your mother's maiden name? My mother, Helen, had told me she passed away years ago, that her name was Jane. But something else was there. A name whispered at the edge of my consciousness. Isabel. It wasn't a password. It was my mother's real name. Helen had lied about that too. A small lie in a sea of them. But it was enough. I clicked forgot password. The security question popped up. What is your childhood dog's name? Helen had told me a story about a golden retriever named Buddy. It was a sweet story. It was also a lie. I typed in the name I somehow knew was right. Sprocket. Access granted. My old inbox loaded. A time capsule from a life I didn't know. And there they were. Dozens of emails from David. The most recent ones were from the weeks leading up to the accident. Mark, you have to call me. She's isolating you. This isn't right. Are you screening my calls? What's going on? I spoke to a lawyer for you. A friend of a friend. Her name is Albright. She specializes in this kind of asset fraud. Please, just talk to her. The final piece clicked into place. My meeting with the lawyer. It wasn't just a plan. It was in motion. David had set it up. Helen hadn't just told me. David moved away. She had actively blocked him, told him I didn't want to see him, creating the very falling out she'd invented. I scrolled down and found a less recent email from David, from about a year ago. The subject line was, "You're a good man, Mark." I opened it. It was a simple message. Hey man, just wanted to say thanks again for helping my sister with the down payment on her car. You didn't have to do that. You're a rock. She's so grateful. The story Helen told me, that David was a mooch who was always asking for loans, shattered. The man I was, the man before the crash, hadn't been cutting off a needy friend. He'd been helping his friend's family. He had been a good man who had been systematically isolated and prepared for slaughter by his own wife. A cold, hard resolve settled over me. It displaced the fear, the confusion, the grief. It was a feeling as solid and real as the laptop under my fingers. The haze of the last 6 months burned away, revealing the stark, ugly truth of my situation. This was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming the life, the fortune, and the very identity that had been stolen from me. I looked at the name in the email. Miss Albright. I had my target. The ghost of old Mark had just passed me the baton, and I was going to run with it right through the finish line, right over Helen and her entire web of lies. It wasn't about revenge, I told myself.
my fingers hovering over the keyboard to compose a new email to an old friend. It was about justice. But deep down, a cold little voice whispered back, for now. The secret plan began to form in the quiet hours when Helen slept, or when she was out on one of her long shopping trips. Trips I now knew were likely meetings with her brother Greg, to strategize their final move. My laptop became my command center. The memory games she thought I was playing were a perfect cover for hours of research, emailing, and planning. My first act was to write to David. My fingers flew across the keyboard, a strange mix of my new hesitant self and the old confident Mark. I told him everything. The accident, the amnesia, the journal, the lies. I finished with a simple, desperate plea. I'm in a cage, Dave. I need your help. His reply came in less than 10 minutes, a testament to how worried he'd been. Mark, oh my God, I knew something was wrong. She told me you were having a complete breakdown, that you were paranoid and didn't want to see anyone from your past. She said the doctors advised total isolation. That which, I'm here, whatever you need. What's the plan?
Just having that connection, that single thread to the outside world, to someone who knew the real me, felt like a lungful of fresh air after months of suffocation. David became my legs and my voice. He was my operative in a world I couldn't freely navigate. Our emails were short, coded, using nicknames and inside jokes from a past I couldn't remember, but that he could supply. We referred to Helen as the warden and Greg as the leech. The house was the institution. David's first task was to dig into Greg. It didn't take much. Public records painted a grim picture of a man who left a trail of financial wreckage wherever he went. 2 bankruptcies, a string of failed businesses, a smoothie shop, a custom t-shirt kiosk, a disastrous attempt at day trading, and a small claims court judgment against him for unpaid rent. He was the classic golden child, enabled his whole life, first by his parents, and now it was clear, by his sister, using my money as her personal bailout fund. This wasn't some master criminal. This was a desperate, grasping loser, and Helen was his lifeline. My next step was the most dangerous, contacting the lawyer, Miss Albright. Her name was a beacon of hope, the one professional my old self had trusted. I couldn't call from the house phone. Helen had the bill itemized. My cell phone was a non-starter. She'd helpfully linked it to her cloud account to back up photos, which I now knew meant she could probably see my entire call log. I had to get out of the house, alone. The opportunity came in the form of my weekly physical therapy appointment. It was the one place Helen didn't always accompany me. She'd drop me off, telling the therapist, a kind woman named Sarah, that it was important for me to regain some independence. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. That Tuesday, I told Helen my shoulder was particularly bad. I played up the pain, wincing as I moved, my performance worthy of an award. She bought it completely, her face a mask of sympathy. At the clinic, I went through the motions with Sarah for the first 20 minutes. Then I clutched my shoulder. Sarah, I'm sorry, I gasped, letting my face go pale. I think I pushed it too hard. The pain it's really sharp. Can I just sit in the waiting room for a bit? I feel a little dizzy. Concern flooded her face. Of course, Mark. Take your time. Do you need me to call Helen? No, I said quickly. No, I don't want to worry her. I'll just sit for a few minutes. The quiet will help. She led me to an empty chair in the waiting room. As soon as she was back in her office, I moved. There was a public phone on the wall near the restrooms, a relic from another era. My heart hammered against my ribs as I dug a handful of change out of my pocket. Change David had instructed me to start carrying. I dialed the number he'd sent me. A crisp, professional voice answered. Albright and Associates. How may I direct your call? I need to speak with Miss Albright, I said, my voice low. It's about a client, Mark Peterson. I'm sorry, sir. Miss Albright is in a meeting. Can I take a message? The receptionist asked, her tone polite but firm. It's urgent. Please, just tell her it's Mark Peterson. The Mark Peterson from before. Tell her Sprockets found his way home. It was a gamble, using the password reset answer. But it was the most personal secret piece of information I had. There was a pause. I could hear the faint sound of keyboard clicks. Please hold, sir. The hold music was a generic, calming piano tune that did nothing to soothe my frayed nerves. Every second felt like an hour. I kept glancing at the door to Sarah's office, expecting her to walk out at any moment. Finally, a new voice came on the line, sharp and focused. "This is Catherine Albright. To whom am I speaking?" "It's me, Mark Peterson." Another pause, longer this time. "Mark, my God. We tried to reach you for weeks after the accident. Your wife said you weren't capable of making decisions and that she had retained her own counsel." "I know what she said," I replied, my voice tight. "She's been lying about everything. I found the journal. I know why I was coming to see you that day. Where are you now? Can you speak freely?" "For a few minutes. I'm at a physical therapy appointment. She thinks I'm a helpless invalid with the mind of a child." "Listen to me, Mark," she said, her tone shifting into high gear. "Do not let her know that you remember anything. Your amnesia is a unique legal situation. Her actions as your de facto caretaker while you are in a vulnerable state could constitute a serious breach of fiduciary duty, possibly even criminal fraud. But we have to move carefully. We need to meet in person. Can you get away?" My mind raced, piecing together a plan. "My best friend, David Miller, he can bring me. Helen thinks we had a falling out." "I remember Mr. Miller," she said. "He was very helpful." "Good. Have him bring you to my office tomorrow at 3 p.m. Do not come to the main entrance. There's a coffee shop on the corner of Elm and 6th. It's called The Daily Grind. I'll be in a booth at the back." The next day I had to orchestrate another performance. I told Helen I'd had another flicker of memory, this time of a park by the water where David and I used to skip rocks. "I know we had a falling out," I said, looking down at my hand sadly. "But maybe if I went there, it would help me understand why, just to see it." Helen was hesitant. The name David was like a warning bell to her, but my request was so pathetic, so couched in the language of a confused man seeking closure, that she couldn't refuse without looking cruel. She was so confident in her control over me, so sure that David was out of the picture, that she let her guard down. "I don't think that's a good idea, Mark," she started, but then she seemed to reconsider. "But if you think it will help you process things, okay. But I'll have to drive you. I don't want you getting lost." This was a problem. David was supposed to pick me up. I sent a frantic one-handed email to him from the bathroom. "Warden wants to drive me. Stall her. Create a diversion. Now." Just as Helen was getting her car keys, her phone rang. I saw the name on the screen. Greg. Her face soured. She walked into the other room to take the call, and her voice immediately became agitated. David, the absolute genius, had used a burner phone app to call Greg, pretending to be a collections agent for a new fictitious payday loan. It was a brilliant, chaotic move. Greg, predictably, had freaked out and called Helen for help. While she was distracted, arguing with her brother, David's car pulled silently into the driveway. I scribbled a note, felt dizzy, went for a walk to clear my head, back soon, and left it on the kitchen table. I slipped out the back door and into David's passenger seat, my heart pounding with the thrill of a successful prison break. The meeting with Catherine Albright changed everything. She was a woman in her 50s with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. The moment I sat down, she slid a thick, bound folder across the table. "This," she said, "is what your life looked like 6 months ago." It was a dossier, a complete, meticulously compiled record of Helen's betrayal. My old self, it turned out, hadn't just been suspicious. He had been a methodical investigator. He had gathered evidence for months. There were printed bank statements with damning transfers highlighted in yellow. Small amounts at first, then larger and larger sums, all moving from our joint investment account to a new account I'd never seen before. An account in the names of Helen Peterson and Gregory Mills. There were copies of emails I'd forwarded to Catherine's office, sent from that old Pelican_flyer address. In them I documented conversations with Helen, her excuses for the missing money becoming more and more elaborate. She said it was for a short-term high-yield investment her brother recommended. One email read, "I know it's a lie. He's bleeding her dry, and she's letting him bleed me." The most damning piece of evidence was a copy of a loan application for a property in another state, a small vineyard. The application was in Helen and Greg's names. It had been submitted 2 days before my accident. They weren't just taking the money, they were buying a new life with it. My life. Catherine explained the legal situation. Before the accident, we were building a case for a divorce filing based on fraudulent dissipation of assets. We had everything we needed to freeze her out and claw back the money. The accident put everything on hold. She used your medical state to gain de facto control, without a formal power of attorney, which you never signed. She's been walking a very fine legal line. She can pay for joint household expenses and your medical care from joint funds, but moving large sums for her own personal use, for her brother's benefit. That's fraud. Plain and simple. This was the part that sparked debate in my own head, the gray area that she was exploiting. The law felt complex, murky, plausible, inaccuracy. Was it really so clear-cut? What if she argued it was for our future, and I just couldn't remember agreeing to it? So what do we do now? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Catherine's expression was grimly determined. Now, we let her continue to think she's in control. We let her dig her own grave. The more she does now, while you are her vulnerable husband, the worse it is for her. We need to regain control of your assets without her realizing it's you. I can initiate certain actions on your behalf, based on our prior engagement. I left that coffee shop a different man. The fog of the last 6 months had been replaced by a cold, hard purpose. I had the truth, I had the evidence, and I had a plan. Helen thought she was managing a lamb. She had no idea she was sleeping next to a wolf who was just relearning how to hunt. My first move had to be silent, digital, and decisive. Armed with the account numbers and information from Catherine Albright's dossier, I was ready to take back control. The beauty of my situation was that Helen believed I was technologically inept, a man who could barely handle a memory game on a laptop. She never once checked the browser history. She never suspected a thing. One evening, while she was engrossed in some vapid reality TV show, I went into the home office under the pretense of wanting to organize the bookshelf, an activity she found suitably harmless and slightly pathetic. With the door closed, I logged into my primary bank's website. Following Catherine's precise instructions, I went through the security protocol to declare my password forgotten. The security questions were the same ones I'd faced before, the ones only the old Mark would know. Sprocket, Isabel. In less than 5 minutes, I had reset the password to something long and complex, a string of characters she could never guess. I then changed the contact information, replacing Helen's email and phone number with my secret Pelican_flyer address, and a new burner phone number. I set up text and email alerts for every single transaction, no matter how small. The digital door to my main account was now locked, and I was the only one with the key. The next step was the joint investment account. This was where the real money was and where she and Greg had been doing the most damage. I couldn't just change the password on that one. She was a joint owner. This required a legal maneuver. The next morning, Catherine Albright, acting on the authority of my pre-accident engagement with her firm, sent a formal letter to the financial institution. It cited a potential issue of elder financial abuse and fraudulent activity pending a medical competency review for one of the account holders, Mr. Mark Peterson. It was a masterstroke of legal jargon. It didn't explicitly accuse Helen, but it raised enough red flags for the bank's compliance department to immediately place a temporary administrative freeze on all withdrawals and transfers from the account. It was a silent, invisible wall, and Helen was about to walk right into it. I didn't have to wait long. 2 days later, the first tremor hit. I was in the living room pretending to read a large print book when Helen walked in, her phone pressed to her ear. She was trying to keep her voice down, but the angry, panicked edge was unmistakable. "What do you mean? It's not going through. Try it again." "No, that's the correct account number. It's a simple wire transfer, for God's sake." She hung up with a frustrated sigh and immediately started tapping at her own laptop. I watched her over the top of my book. I saw her brow furrow, her mouth tighten into a thin line. She was trying to log in to the investment account. A minute passed, then another. She let out an exasperated noise. "Is everything all right, dear?" I asked, my voice full of mild bovine curiosity. She jumped, startled. She hadn't realized I was watching her.
Oh.
"Yes, fine. Just the bank's website is acting up. It's always so buggy." She slammed the laptop shut with more force than necessary, but the seed of panic had been planted. Later that afternoon, she came to me,
her expression a careful blend of nonchalance and concern. Mark, honey.
I was just trying to pay one of your big medical bills, the one for the initial hospital stay, and the payment was declined.
Did you? I don't know. Maybe you were on the banking site and accidentally changed something? I looked at her with the most convincing wide-eyed innocence I could muster. The banking site. Helen, you know I don't go on there. The doctor said. Well, you know, it's too confusing. Are you sure you had the right password? Yes, I'm sure, she snapped, then immediately softened her tone when she saw me flinch at her sharpness. I'm sorry, honey. I'm just frustrated with the bank. I'll call them in the morning and sort it out. I saw the flicker of suspicion in her eyes. She was considering the possibility that I was involved, but the logic just wasn't there for her. How could the broken amnesiac man she put to bed every night possibly orchestrate something like this? It was impossible. She dismissed the thought, attributing the problem to a bureaucratic error. Her arrogance was my greatest asset. The pressure began to build. The next day, I overheard her on the phone with Greg. This time there was no attempt to hide the panic in her voice. No, Greg, I told you, the money isn't there. The account is frozen. I spent 2 hours on the phone with them and all they'll say is it's an administrative review. I don't know why. It makes no sense. Of course he doesn't know anything. He can barely remember to put his shoes on the right feet. This has to be a mistake. We just have to wait it out. Her care for me became more intense, more cloying. She hovered constantly. She started bringing me documents to sign, hiding them amongst junk mail or magazines. Just some standard insurance forms, honey. This is just for the pharmacy records, Mark. I recognized the letterhead on one of them. It was for a power of attorney. I would look at them with a confused frown, push them aside and complain of a headache. It's all just words, Helen. My brain gets all jumbled. Can't you just handle it? My helplessness was my shield, and every time she tried to push, I retreated deeper into the fog. I was a fortress of incompetence, and she couldn't find a way in. Her frustration was mounting. She was so close to her goal, the vineyard in the sun, and now it was all slipping through her fingers for no reason she could comprehend. The final desperate gambit came a week later. She announced that she'd hired a new financial advisor to help us sort out this mess. He was coming to the house. I knew instantly he wasn't a real advisor. He was Greg's crony, or worse, just some guy they were bringing in to intimidate me, to pressure me into signing whatever they put in front of me. This was it. The endgame was starting, and I was ready. The arrival of Helen's brother Greg signaled the beginning of the end of their charade. I was in the living room, looking out the window at the gray, drizzling sky, when a flashy, obnoxious sports car that was far too expensive for a man with 2 bankruptcies pulled into the driveway. Helen rushed to the door to greet him, a forced brightness in her voice. I had never officially met him since the accident. Helen had kept him away, probably because even she knew that his abrasive, greedy personality would be too much for her fragile narrative. But desperation was making them sloppy. He swaggered into the house like he owned the place, which in his mind, I suppose he already did. He was a few years younger than Helen, with a soft, doughy face, a weak chin, and the smug, entitled air of a man who has never worked a real day in his life. He glanced at me on the couch and gave me a condescending smirk. So this is the patient. How you holding up there, champ? I just blinked at him, my face a perfect blank. Hello, I said softly. Helen shot Greg a warning look before turning to me. Her smile stretched thin. Mark, honey, this is my brother Greg. He's here to help us with all the confusing financial stuff. They sat me down on the couch between them, a tactic designed to intimidate, to make me feel small and cornered. This was their family meeting. It felt more like an interrogation. Mark, Helen began, her voice dripping with phony sympathy. Greg and I have been doing a lot of thinking about your future, about what's best for you. We know how much you struggle here, how confusing everything can be. Greg chimed in, leaning forward with a conspiratorial air. The thing is, buddy, this house is a lot to manage, and with your condition, well, you need professional care. Full time. My blood ran cold, but I kept my expression placid. I knew what was coming. We've found the most wonderful place for you, Helen continued, pulling a glossy brochure from her purse. The cover showed smiling, silver-haired seniors playing shuffleboard in the sun. It's a beautiful community in Arizona. The climate would be so good for you. It's a specialized memory care facility. They can give you the kind of support I just can't provide on my own. This was their plan. It was more sinister than I'd imagined. They weren't just going to leave me. They were going to warehouse me. They'd stick me in a facility, 1,000 miles away, in a place where I knew no one, where I had no connections. I'd be the confused man with amnesia, whose loving wife and brother-in-law managed his affairs from afar. Once I was safely tucked away, they could liquidate everything, sell the house, drain what was left, and disappear to their vineyard. Greg slid a sheaf of papers and a pen onto the coffee table in front of me. It's all taken care of. We just need your signature on a few things to get the ball rolling. This one allows us to sell the house on your behalf, and this one is just a formality, giving us permission to manage your medical and financial decisions. It just makes things easier for you, Mark. You won't have to worry about a thing ever again. I stared at the documents. The top one was a durable power of attorney. The other was a real estate listing agreement. I could feel the rage building inside me, a hot, liquid pressure behind my eyes. This was the moment, the culmination of 6 months of lies, of gaslighting, of theft. I looked up from the papers, my gaze moving from Greg's smug, predatory face to Helen's, which was arranged in a perfect mask of loving concern. It was the performance of a lifetime, and it was about to come to a crashing end. I let the silence stretch out. I picked up the pen, then set it down again. I looked at the power of attorney document, then looked at Helen. My voice was quiet, almost a whisper, but it cut through the air like a shard of glass. I don't remember signing a power of attorney, Helen. The air in the room went still. Her smile faltered, a tiny crack in the facade. What, Mark, honey? We talked about this. After the accident, the doctors, your legal team, they all said it was for the best. I shook my head slowly, deliberately. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. No, I don't think we did. Albright has been very clear with me about that. I said the lawyer's name. Albright. The effect was instantaneous and electric. Helen's face went white. All the color drained away, leaving behind the waxy, slack-jawed expression of pure shock. Greg's smugness evaporated, replaced by a sudden sharp wariness. Who? Greg barked. Who's Miss Albright? My lawyer, I said, turning my gaze on him. The fog, the confusion, the vacant stare, it was all gone from my eyes. I let him see it. I let him see the man his sister had tried to bury, the one I was on my way to see the day I crashed my car. Greg scoffed, a desperate blustering sound. That's ridiculous. It's not really up to you, buddy. You're not competent to make these decisions. I stood up. I felt taller, stronger than I had in months. That's where you're wrong, I said, my voice low and steady. A judge might disagree with you on that. But what's not up for debate is that this is my house, this is my money, and I think you should both leave. Now, the power in the room had shifted so completely, so suddenly, it was a physical force. They were staring at me, at this stranger, who looked like Mark but sounded like a prosecutor. The helpless patient was gone. The man they were robbing was back, and he remembered everything that mattered. The carefully constructed world of lies shattered in an instant. Helen, for the first time, looked truly lost. The mask of the devoted wife was gone, and underneath was just a common thief, caught red-handed. She started to stammer, her mind scrambling for a new lie, a new manipulation. Mark, I don't understand. I was trying to protect you, protect me. I laughed, a harsh, ugly sound that I didn't recognize as my own. You were protecting the assets, for you, for him. I jabbed a finger toward Greg, who had gone from smug to sullen. He looked like a cornered rat. He took a step forward, his voice rising to a snarl. What is this? What have you been doing, faking this whole time, lying here like a vegetable while you plotted against us? Oh, the amnesia is real, Greg, I said, walking calmly to the small desk in the corner of the room. I opened the drawer and pulled out a file, a crisp new folder containing a copy of Catherine Albright's entire dossier. My memory of the last 5 years is a complete blank, a black hole, but my memory of the last 6 months, it's crystal clear. I remember every condescending word, every fake smile, every time you two looked at me like I was a broken ATM that just needed one last kick to spit out the rest of the cash. I tossed the folder onto the coffee table. It landed with a satisfying thud. I also remembered my lawyer's name, Helen, and my best friend's. It's amazing what comes back to you when you have the right motivation. Catherine has been holding on to the original of this for me. She kept it safe. Helen's eyes were wide with terror as she stared at the folder. She knew what was in it. It's a complete record of your theft.
I
Continued, my voice cold and even. Every dollar you siphoned out of our investment account, every wire transfer to Greg's little shell corporation you set up to buy your vineyard, your whole pathetic plan to dump me in a home and ride off into the sunset on my life savings, it's all in there. The journal entry I found, well, that was just the appetizer. This is the main course. Helen finally broke. A strangled sob escaped her lips. The mask melted away completely, revealing a face contorted by pure panicked greed. Mark, no, please. I was scared. The medical bills were piling up. I didn't know what to do. I was just trying to secure our future. I cut her off, my voice like ice. Our future. There is no our future. There is my future. And then there is whatever is left for the two of you.
all
After the district attorney is done with you, you weren't scared, Helen. You were opportunistic. You saw a man at his weakest, a man who couldn't even remember his own mother's name, and you decided to pick his bones clean. The only thing that saved me was the accident itself. The amnesia you thought was your greatest stroke of luck. It gave me the one thing I needed to beat you. It gave me time. As if on cue, the doorbell rang. Helen and Greg both flinched, their heads snapping toward the door. I didn't move. I'd get that, I said. I believe it's for you. Helen, trembling, walked to the door and opened it. Standing on the porch were Catherine Albright, holding a thick envelope, and David, my friend David, looking solid as a rock and twice as imposing. His eyes met mine over Helen's shoulder, and he gave me a slow single nod. Catherine stepped inside, her presence filling the room with an unimpeachable authority. She didn't even glance at Greg. She walked directly to Helen and handed her the envelope. Helen Peterson, you are being served with papers for divorce on the grounds of felony fraud and dissipation of marital assets. This is also a temporary restraining order, effective immediately, requiring you to vacate this property. Your personal effects will be packed and delivered to a location of your choosing. She then turned to Greg. And for you, Mr. Mills, I'd advise you to retain counsel. A criminal complaint for fraud and conspiracy to commit fraud has been filed with the county prosecutor's office this morning. I suspect you'll be hearing from them shortly. For a moment, there was just stunned silence. Then Greg, with a roar of pure impotent rage, lunged toward me.
ye son of a
He never finished the sentence. David stepped between us, moving with a speed that was surprising for a man his size. He didn't even touch Greg. He just stood there, a human wall, and said in a low, dangerous voice, I wouldn't do that. Greg froze, his fists clenched, his face purple with fury. He looked from David's unmoving form to my calm expression and knew, finally and completely, that he had lost. They were escorted out of my house. Helen was crying, not tears of remorse but tears of frustrated greed. Greg was muttering threats under his breath. I watched them go, watched Helen get into her car, not the reliable sedan we'd shared, but a newer, flashier model I now knew she'd bought with my money. The silence they left behind was the most beautiful, peaceful sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of my life, returning to me. In the months that followed, my life began to reassemble itself, but into a new shape. The divorce was swift and brutal for Helen. Faced with the mountain of evidence Catherine had compiled, Helen and Greg took a plea deal to avoid jail time. The criminal conviction, however, came with heavy fines, restitution, and 5 years of probation. They had to pay back every cent they had stolen, and then some. Their dream of a vineyard in the sun evaporated, leaving them with nothing but debt and a criminal record. I heard through the grapevine that Helen was living with her parents, and Greg was working a minimum wage job. They got what they deserved. The universe, it turns out, has a keen sense of irony. I sold the house. There were too many ghosts in it, both real and imagined. I didn't need the space, and more importantly, I didn't want the memories it held, even the ones I couldn't access. It was a clean break. I bought a small modern apartment in the city, with a great view, and a kitchen I was slowly learning how to use. It was closer to David, and that felt right. My friendship with David was one of the greatest treasures I recovered from the wreckage. We had a long, difficult conversation one night, sitting on my new balcony.
He apologized for not pushing harder, for believing Helen's lies that I wanted to be left alone. I apologized for letting her isolate me so completely, even before the accident. We didn't have to rebuild our friendship. We just had to clear away the debris that Helen had piled on top of it. It was stronger than ever. I'm still in therapy, both for the memory loss and for the trauma of the betrayal. My neurologist says it's unlikely I'll ever recover the lost 5 years, and I've realized to my own surprise that I'm okay with that. I'm not trying to recover the man I was anymore. I don't need to know if he liked comfortable sweaters or lighthouse mugs. That man's life ended on a rain-slicked road. I'm building a new man now, a man forged in lies and fire, but one who stands on a foundation of integrity that, as it turns out, was there all along. You know, it's a strange thing, a curse that becomes a weapon. The amnesia was supposed to be my prison, the final lock on a cage of Helen's design, but in the end it was my key. It gave me a second chance to see the truth that was hiding in plain sight. It made me a ghost in my own life, able to watch and listen and plan. While my enemies saw nothing but a broken man, they underestimated me. They thought that by taking my memories, they had taken my mind. But they were wrong. My memory was gone, but my instincts, my character, my very soul, those things were mine, and they were stronger than any lie. It makes me wonder, what would you have done in my shoes? Would you have confronted her the moment you found that journal, a big explosive confrontation, or would you have played the long game like I did? Sometimes I've learned, the quietest moves make the loudest impact. It wasn't about revenge in the beginning, but I have to admit, by the end, the justice felt pretty sweet. The real lesson, though, wasn't about getting even. It was about reclaiming my own worth. It was about understanding that you cannot let someone else's twisted, manipulative definition of you become your reality. Sometimes you have to burn the old map, throw it on the fire, and trust yourself to find a new way home. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Have you ever had to deal with a betrayal from someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? If you found this story compelling, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button, and please subscribe to the channel for more stories like this one. Thanks for listening.